What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about 164, 564. Aren't they the same thing? Why do we choose one or the other? We're going to be talking about the difference between labeling something a 164 or a 564. So, if you look at a 164 or a 564, you'll notice that the three notes for in C major scale are the exact same. 164 versus 564, take two. What's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to be talking about the differences between a 164 and 564. Now, we're in C major scale. If you notice, the chord that is labeled a 164 is G, C, and E. And then it moves to a G major chord, which is a 5 chord. But then if you look at this 564, it is also G, C, and E, and it moves to a G major chord, a 5 chord. How can the same three notes be called two different things? Well, let's talk about that. If you're going to call this GCE a 164, what you're doing is you're viewing these three notes as one chord. That's it, one chord. Therefore, you would label it a 164 moving to 5. You have two separate chords, 164 to 5. That's why you would label it a 164. Now, the reason why it's called a 164 is because the notes C, E, and G, it is a C major chord with the fifth in the bass, which makes it a second inversion, and we'll label that a 6/4. Inversions is discussed in more detail in another video. But this is why you will label it a 164 and 5. You're viewing these three notes as one chord. On the other hand, if you're going to call this a 5/64, you're thinking about this chord in two different components. One, you have your bass note, which is G. Now, the third and the fifth, or the two notes above, you're not thinking it as a part of this chord. You're viewing these as a suspension. All a suspension is instead of just immediately playing a G major chord or a 5 chord on the downbeat, usually the first measure or the first beat of a measure, you're going to be playing the note or two notes above the third and the fifth, suspending the resolution or the sounding of a 5 chord. So the reason why we call this a 5/64 is because we're viewing these two notes as a suspension that will eventually resolve to a 5 chord. Why is it a 6/4? Because we're mixing Roman numerals, figure bass notation. So what is a fourth above G? That's C. There's your 4. What is a sixth above G? That's E. There's your 6. And we have this movement of a sixth above G resolving down to the fifth above G. We have the fourth above G resolving down to the third above G. Now, the details of figure bass notation will be discussed in another video in more detail, but this is why we would call it a 5/64 moving to a 5/3. Now, this has caused a lot of debate. Do you call this a 1/64 or a 5/64? We have decided to call it a CAD6 or a cadential 6/4, just to make it easier and to stop all of the petty finding that tends to happen with music theorists. So that's the difference between labeling the same chord as either a 1/64 or a 5/64. Whether you view this chord and all three of its notes as one chord, or you view this chord as one bass note and a 2-note suspension that will eventually resolve down to the third and the fifth of the 5 chord. Thank you for joining me today. This is Music Theory with Mr. Sanders. I will see you next time.